A lot of people, when it comes to weight loss or whatever, they just focus on the physical, calories in, calories out. But then they end up in this kind of perpetual cycle of diets or whatever it is, right? They don't end up actually fixing the core problem, which is the reason they are overweight or unhealthy in the first place.
Food, it's a coping mechanism for many, for men more than women. We turn to food for comfort. When does it become a cause for concern? If you're struggling with your weight, if you're struggling around food, if you're losing control around food, constant weight fluctuations, if you're feeling guilty after eating, if you're binge eating, there's obviously something there that's happened in the individual's past on their amount of restrictive diets they've been on the house that they've raised in.
So it's always like there's an element of lack of control, right?
Absolutely.
Rather than consciously being aware of what they're doing.
Absolutely.
They're doing something and then they immediately regret it, and there's like, where's that link between doing it and having the control to stop it?
It's a loss of control, and if you ask a lot of people, they'll tell you it's like an out-of-body experience. It's very similar to that kind of experience and what these individuals are going through, and personally been through myself, to be honest.
Just had the most incredible interview with Natassia D'Souza, who is an emotional eating and weight loss expert. On her weight loss journey, she lost over 65 kilograms, and she attributes that to childhood trauma. When you watch this episode, you're going to get a true understanding of how, as human beings, when we repress emotions as youngsters, they express with physical symptoms. That is what this episode is all about. It's not about weight loss. It's about how we process trauma as adults. So Natassia, welcome to the Warrior Academy podcast.
My pleasure, Matt. Thank you for having me.
It's amazing how your story is so inspiring. I mean, even just chatting to you now for the last 5 minutes, there is so much that I know the Warrior Academy parents watching this, or any of our viewers watching this from around the world, will really, really align with. And just for anyone who doesn't know who you are, could you give me a brief intro into who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Natassia D'Souza. I'm an emotional eating coach. I focus on emotional eating habits, binge eating, and helping people get to a point of unintentional weight loss. I do this by helping them rewiring their thought process, rewiring their day-to-day habits and activities. I'm also trained in CBT for eating disorders and trauma attachment linked to eating disorders. So I take methods from those programs and incorporate those with my clients to help them with their food struggles, make them look outside of the regular eat less workout and kind of dive deep into actually what it is that they're struggling with rather than just I overeat. So yeah, that's me in a bit of a nutshell.
Yeah, brilliant. Great quick summary. I think there's so much you do, it's hard to quickly summarize it, but what I'm really fascinated in is that connection, right, between the mental and the physical.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people, when it comes to weight loss or whatever, they just focus on the physical, calories in, calories out. But then they end up in this kind of perpetual cycle of diets or whatever it is, right? They don't end up actually fixing the core problem, which is the reason they are overweight or unhealthy in the first place.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, food it's a coping mechanism for many, for men more than women, right? We turn to food for comfort. Now, people always tell me, well, Natassia, I'm an emotional eater, and that's absolutely right. Everyone emotionally eats. But when does it become a cause for concern, right? If you're struggling with your weight, if you're struggling around food, if you're losing control around food, constant weight fluctuations, if you're feeling guilty after eating, if you're binge eating, then it's a cause for concern. And this is when we need to step back from the food itself and look at, well, why am I actually so attracted to this right now? Why can I not just eat one and be happy? Why do I need to eat the whole bag, right? And if I eat the whole bag, why do I suddenly feel guilty and like shit after? And then my first immediate thought is, tomorrow I'll go back on the diet.
Right.
Why is it just not a normal for me to be like, yeah, okay, had a bag of crisps, now I can move on with life? So there's obviously something there that's happened in the individual's past on their amount of restrictive diets they've been on the house that they've raised in.
So it's always like there's an element of lack of control, right?
Absolutely.
Rather than consciously being aware of what they're doing.
Absolutely.
They're doing something and then they immediately regret it, and there's like, where's that link between doing it and having the control to stop it?
Yeah, exactly. It's a loss of control, and if you ask a lot of people, they'll tell you it's like an out-of-body experience. It's almost very similar to, have you ever sit in the car and you've driven home, you're like, I don't even know
how do I even get back?
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
It's the same thing. It's the same experience because they'll eat a bag of crisps, like, I don't even know when it got over, Natassia. The last time I put my hand in the bag and it was done. And it was a big bag of crisps or a big box of cookies. So it's very similar to that kind of experience and what these individuals are going through, and personally been through myself, to be honest.
I guess that's kind of linked to habits, right? And it's like, well, you could, that process of not being completely unaware of the automatic habit you're doing, it can be a healthy habit or a negative habit, right?
Yeah.
Unhealthy habit. And it's like, you can train yourself to have that experience with healthy habits.
Absolutely.
Or, you can be going on a run and you suddenly don't realize how far you've run because you've zoned out. Or you could be finishing up a bag of crisps and it'd be the same kind of thing, right?
Exactly. There's Charles Duhigg wrote the book, The Habits, and it talks about the habit loops and how they work in an individual's day-to-day process. And it's like you said, there are good habits, there are bad habits. According to the habit loop, if the habit's not serving you, you can't just break it, but you can replace the reward system. But people don't understand that. They think, okay, I'm just going to wake up, I'm going to have more determination, more, willpower, and I got this, I do this. But if the habit is so deep ingrained into your system, you've had it since you were a child, then how do you just break it, right? But you can deviate it. You can hold its hand like it's a little child and say, I can guide you, and then get back to, let's say, a good habit or a better habit, and then kind of take it from there.
Wow. That's fascinating. I think, people get excited by changing their habits. Once they are aware they're making unhealthy decisions, there's that element of motivation where they suddenly feel inspired to make a change. But the reality is, we're human beings are quite basic creatures, really. And we've almost got built into us, if this, then that, right?
Yeah.
It's like your body has a process that it's remembered and trained into it. If I do this habit, I get this reward.
Exactly.
And so you've got to change if this, then that, right? So what is the change you then choose to, put yourself down?
Exactly. And, the reward varies from person to person. I always tell my clients, because they'll be like, Natassia, well, what's my reward? And I said, what pleases me might not please you, right? The ultimate goal is to get you to a place where it's a healthier habit. It's a healthier coping mechanism. But for now, maybe just washing your face with cold water makes sense. Yeah. Maybe going out for a walk makes sense. Maybe
it's like interrupting it.
Exactly. Yeah. Right. And that's just breaking that thought process in that given moment, but doing something else instead. Listening to some loud music, watching something funny, picking up the phone, talking to a friend, and initially it's quite hard for some people, because how do we go from eating massive amounts to now picking up a phone and talking to a friend? So that initial process is, I would say, the toughest bit. That's where I step in as their coach and say, okay, let's do this in very small increments and get them to a point then the switch makes complete sense. Yeah. Right? But slow but steady is all I say.
Slow but steady.
Yeah.
This link to comfort eating, it's almost like an addiction, right? Well, it is an addiction. And so I imagine a lot of the work you do is very aligned with coaches and mentors and experts who deal with clients who are facing addiction, whether it's alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, even emotional addiction to certain things.
Absolutely.
What are the kind of carryovers have you noticed there?
So it is an addiction. You're absolutely right. I would also say obsession at some points. Constantly thinking of food. It rises up the most in people who don't know how to deal with stress, don't know how to deal with sadness, don't know how to deal with depression, don't know how to deal with anger. And I remember when I was younger and my binge eating was at its prime, and people would say, oh, stress, and I'm so stressed. And I'm like, what are they talking about? What is stress? But for me,
you couldn't notice it.
I couldn't notice it. I was eating so much, I didn't even allow my body to experience it, So what I've understood from myself, from my teachings, and from my clients now is a lot of these individuals, as they were getting raised, had really poor expression of emotions, really poor. So it could have either been being raised in a household where you had to walk on eggshells because maybe one of the parents in the household had a bad temper, or you had to always appear in a certain limelight. So you couldn't really express your emotions as a child. As an adult, you're then getting raised in that same manner. You then also end up becoming a people pleaser. So if my mother or my father didn't like me as an individual and I had to conform, then of course I had to conform as an adult to please my boss, my partner, my friends. And you become this people-pleasing individual that's constantly pleasing others. And that just causes so much hate, so much harm within. And then you turn to food for comfort because that's the one thing you don't have to please.
Yeah.
Food pleases you, right? So that's that whole connection there. And there's a huge, just from looking at my clients alone, there's a huge connection between people pleasing and binge eating and overeating, right? It's varies on a spectrum from individual to individual, but it does happen.
It's amazing the impact of a people pleaser as well, not just on themselves, but also in the relationships they then have, right?
Absolutely.
I know a lot of people pleasers then, they live very unhappy and unhealthy lives because they're rarely doing things for themselves. They go down this rabbit hole of trying to please other people, and they put themselves in very tricky situations, don't they?
Yeah, they do. And, you know, the sad part about it is having been there myself, I was a big people pleaser. And having seen it from some of my clients now is they don't understand that there is another side. They believe that this is the way of life. This is the way it should be. And that's the most hurtful part, because there is another side. And once they get to experience it, once they learn how to say no, once they're comfortable with feeling the fact that that person's angry and I'm actually okay with that, it's liberation.
Yeah.
You know, and you experience that enough times, there's no going back. I know I'm not going back, right? My people-pleasing days are way behind me, you know? So it's, that's that element. And it's just about making them realize that, because it's possible. It is absolutely possible. And once that happens, then you're not feeling suffocated. You're not feeling like, I need food because I'm suffocated. I can't express how I feel. So this is where that whole unintentional element of weight loss comes in, because now you feel like yourself, you want to express yourself, you don't want to suffocate yourself, you don't want to, you know, overeat because you're feeling unworthy, and then you want to focus on your body, your goals, your future. So that's kind of how it all pieces together.
Yeah, right. Like so many negative experiences that we have as adults, it all stems back to childhood, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny because I start most of these podcast episodes asking the guests about their childhood, because often we get incredible, inspiring people in here who have really dedicated their lives to something in particular. And it's like they're doing that for a reason. And so the first thing I say is, tell me about what life was like growing up. And so I've got a feeling that you're no different, right? So tell me, what was life like growing up?
You know, life for me growing up was very interesting. Now looking back, I'm very grateful for everything that's happened to me. However, I was a victim of sexual trauma, not once, not twice, but 3 times in my life, at the ages of 3, 6, and 9. So quite a young child, not able to understand how to process those emotions very diligently and in a very confident way, and in a very, I mean, I wouldn't say confident, but I just didn't know how to process them. And I wasn't able to share those emotions with my parents. You know, they weren't aware of what happened to me. Actually, no one was aware of what happened to me until I turned 30, because I wasn't ready to talk about it. And my majority of my life, I thought that was behind. But
all of your developmental years, you were repressing this,
absolutely,
these experiences and the emotions associated with that until the age of 30.
Exactly.
What caused you to confront those emotions?
By the age of 30, I had decided that I wanted to take on coaching, and I wanted to make a change in the world. But I knew there was something holding me back. I knew that I've got the eating down packed. I'm working out 5 to 6 days a week. What is it? And when I look back in time, and having started my healing journey so deep, this was the one area that I didn't allow therapists to touch on. I didn't allow my hypnotherapist to touch on. No one was allowed to touch this area. They knew it happened.
The rules were up.
Yeah.
And you started noticing it.
Exactly. And I said, if I want to be there for my clients on an emotional level and understand the pain and the grief and why their minds are the way they are, I cannot do that without expressing it myself. So I decided to open up that door when I was 30. And it was one of the most difficult doors ever, but it had to be done. Because the minute you open that door, you have just opened a floodgate of memories of the past, you know? You have experiences, you have memories. And
new memories which you didn't even realize.
Exactly.
You know?
Guilt, sadness, hurt. And it's almost like I was reliving a lot of the memories again. So, you know, my therapy was quite high. My hypnotherapy was a huge role and part of my life. That was quite high as well. But as I was learning, evolving, and growing, I felt liberated. I felt that for the first time, I could breathe. And the air I was breathing was fresh. It made sense, you know, and hence I became very public about it. I started speaking about it on my social media. I started talking about it with my clients. And, you know, it surprises me till this day when I hear a client say, you know, Natassia, I'm here for you to help me with my relationship with food, but I believe in you because I too was, you know, sexually molested as a 3-year-old or sexually abused as a 3-year-old, you know, and that's my belief. To see you and see how far you've come, it makes me believe that I can get through, and that's what I want to hear.
And so as difficult and traumatic it is to actually go through that again.
Exactly.
When you process it, you go through it again.
Exactly.
You know, as I feel like a lot of people who go through that, they get the strength from realizing that it helps other people. And then part of that healing journey is actually using that experience to benefit the world.
Absolutely.
It's like you could just keep it to yourself and it would just be a horrible thing to hold on to.
Yeah.
But it then ends up being this thing that fuels you.
Absolutely.
And so the darkness has an element of light to it. And it's like you go through all this traumatic, horrible negativity in your life, which is forced upon you. And then you're able to then help the world in a way which you wouldn't otherwise be able to, right?
Absolutely. You know, and this is why I said this in the beginning. Now when I look back at my life, I can finally sit back as an adult and say, it makes sense. Because as a child, I was like, why me? You know, why is this happening to me? Why am I overweight? Why is my mom always yelling? Why is it happening to me 1, 2, 3 times in my life, you know? Why, and I'm gaining weight, and I don't have these loving relationships with men, and I'm getting cheated on, and I'm getting abused. Nothing made sense.
Yeah.
It just didn't make sense. Now I can look back at all of that, and I can say, wow. And I believe it takes a very strong person to say, I'm so grateful for all of that happened to me, you know? And if I could do it again, to be in the place that I am today, I would. Wow. Because back then it didn't. But now, just seeing the smile on my clients' faces, seeing the impact it made, telling them, I've been there, I completely understand what that feels like, and this is what I did, and this is what helped me, and this is how it makes sense on a, you know, psychological level. And they say, well, okay, then if that makes sense, let's do it. For me, I get it now.
Yeah.
Completely get it now, you know, and it's...
Have you heard of Dr. DeMartini?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you done much with him? Because I've studied a lot of his work, and I've worked with him. He's one of the world's leading behavioral psychologists, and I've worked with him a lot with our bullying program. And some of the stuff you're saying is just resonating so much because, you know, when you go through bullying, it's the most traumatic, difficult experience, especially as a child, right? And bullying comes in many ways.
Yeah.
What you would have experienced could have come under that, right? And so it's only when you really understand yourself and have such a deeper perspective and wider view of your life and the big picture that you're able to look back on really horrible negative experiences and realize how they actually benefit you. And nothing in life comes as traumatic and difficult as it is without a flip side to it.
Yeah.
Right? If you're able to have the strength of character and courage to face that.
Yeah.
It's like one of the things we spoke about before the cameras went live, right? You know, for parents, courage is the most important trait because we've got to stand up to these things.
Yeah.
You know, if you go through all the things you went through and then you have kids and you don't process it, you pass that on to them. You know, those insecurities and those challenges and the trauma is just generational. It just transcends generations. And so, you know, it takes a very brave person to face that and to confront it.
Yeah.
And then it gives you this element of knowledge and, you know, a deeper understanding of life itself. I think you become more wise because you realize once you go through something like that, you realize everything else in your life actually has a positive and a negative to it. There's this universal balance, right? Just a quick shout out to the guys at Shield who manage this podcast, come up with the strategy behind the podcast, help me schedule interviews as well as do all of the editing and the producing of the podcast. Without them, we wouldn't be able to produce this podcast. If you would like to create your own podcast, I can't recommend the Shield team enough. They have done well over 100 episodes for me over the last few years, and I've been so pleased with the results. So have a look in the description of this video or the podcast episode, and you'll see how to get in touch with them yourself.
I mean, you're spot on there, honestly. It's exactly that. And, you know, it's so important for us to become aware if we're struggling with certain areas of our life and look back at our childhood, our relationship with our parents, and kind of, you know, I'm sure there are great memories and I'm sure there's everything that's right, but there's also the negatives and where people get stuck, and where I got stuck personally. I was raised with a mother who her temper was beyond me. And if she yelled, she would start yelling for 4 or 5 hours on end. Hence, I ended up becoming this child that always needed to walk on eggshells. You know, if I wanted to express my anger, I was told to shut up. You can't do that, you know? And so it was a very tough environment. But when I would try to explain myself to therapists, and I would try to explain what she did, but then I would say, no, but, you know, she's my mom. She didn't mean it. Almost like downplaying what happened. And that was one of the mistakes I made. I think I would have really sped up my recovery if I would have owned it and say, I don't want to become that. Yeah. I don't want that to be me for my kids. I don't want that to carry on. I love her as a mother. She did the best that she could, but those qualities impacted me so badly. They impacted the way I spoke, the way I interacted with people. And the minute I said that, the minute I didn't justify the kind of person she was, it was like the shackles I was let go, you know? And that's when I started realizing, as we spoke about, I will never repeat this cycle. I don't have it in me to be that person.
The cycle ends when the courage peaks, right?
Exactly, exactly, right? Because you see it for what it is, and you no longer want to partake in it. Because so many of us are raised in households where we feel uncomfortable or we feel unsafe, but subconsciously we become those people. Yeah. You know, I hear it from my clients all the time, and actually they don't see it until I bring it up. They'll have a parent that was, you know, quite violent in the house or things of that sort, and they'll tell themselves, I don't want to ever become my father because he was very violent, or I don't want to ever become my mother, she was very violent. But in a very subtle way becoming them, or they tried so hard to not become their father, they became their mother, not realizing her qualities and her downfalls as well. So that's a whole other ball game that we have to bring to light then, right?
Yeah, right. The complex human journey. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. The more you avoid something, the more you become something else. And where does it end?
That's exactly it, you know. And this is, I tell my clients, I was like, this is why I'm here. And you'll hear it, you're like, oh my God, Natassia, I was trying so hard to not become my father. I think parts of me have become my mother, you know? And and while she was a great person.
And maybe if you had a violent father, becoming a mother meant you became a people pleaser, and, you know, the balance then.
There you go.
I guess the solution there is when you look back and you understand everything, understand that everything comes with a positive and negative.
Absolutely.
Every single beneficial thing that you see benefit in. You know, one of the things that DeMartini says is, you know, people fantasize about the positive. They fantasize about the positive outcome of something.
Yeah.
Without considering the negatives. It's like, this would be great if I could just do this, then I'll be happy. Yeah. And then I realize, well, actually, would you be happy because you have all these other problems, right?
Absolutely.
And vice versa. And I think it's just, kind of looking at it stoically, stepping back a little bit and just observing is really, you know, when you've got anything coming up in your life or when you're looking back in your life, just observing that and trying to stay neutral on the positive and negative, and actually try to pick and choose the qualities you want without having to be all one way or all the other way is a really beneficial way of doing it.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things I tell when I have an onboarding call with a client, or when I have a discovery call, when I'm trying to see if we're a good fit, I always ask them, how do you handle failure? You know, and everyone gets really defensive because I'm investing in you. I'm not supposed to fail. And I was like, well, then you're investing for the wrong reasons, because I expect you to fail. The person you're going to become, the person you're striving to be, will only get made in the moments that you fail. Not your winning moments, not in the honeymoon phase that you give me in the 2 weeks because you did your steps and you drank your waters. That's not what I want to see. I want to see you fail.
I want to see you climbing out of that hole.
Exactly. You know. Because that's where the change that you're looking for, that's where it's made. And depending on the way the person answers this, and depending on how willing they are to fail, I know how well they're going to succeed, right? Because they sign up with me for 6 months or more. This is not a 60-day changeover. No, it's 6 months. I mean, my shortest client is 6 months. My longest are 2 or 3 years. That's how long they're with me on this journey. It's because they know it's lifelong. They know I'm going to fail. They know I have to pick myself back up. But that's that whole element, you know, seeing that, yes, I am doing something new, but the chances of me failing, because I will go back to what I'm familiar to, you know, in my moments of weakness, when my back is against the wall, when I'm stressed, and accepting that fact, and then saying, but how do I pick myself back up? That's the key element. Because the minute you can say, the faster you can pick yourself back up, the faster you can get to your path of greatness or the change that you're looking for. And that's the part that people don't understand or are not willing to understand, because they're being sold that, no, you can have a full mind, body transformation in 60 days. No failure. You just have to follow this actual plan. That's not the case.
You're not fixing the whole problem, which takes a lot of time, right?
Exactly. That's never the case, right? And it's being sold to these individuals, and they're buying into it with the hope that they'll change, and then they don't change. Then they're even bigger failures to themselves, you know? And then sometimes...
And that's a big fail attempt. They think the process doesn't work.
Exactly.
So they don't want to try it again. Or,
exactly.
They lose faith in it.
That's it. And sometimes I'm left with these broken pieces from the misdoings or the mishappenings of other, trainers or coaches or whatever it might be there. And then just kind of teaching them the hope, the value, the self-worth, the learn to pick it's okay to fail. You know, I always say failing forward. Every opportunity that you fail in, you're always failing forward. What did you learn?
I think that's a great mindset and a great strategy, which I wish that most of society could just pick up on, right? If we knew how important failure was, we would almost be promoting the chance of experiencing it, right?
Yeah.
And I feel so much in the society nowadays, as parents, as an educational system, extracurricular activities, we prevent young people from experiencing failure as much as possible. We wrap them in bubble wrap, when really we need to be providing them more opportunities to fail.
Absolutely.
So that we can provide them more opportunities to be mentored through that.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately, when you look at character development, it's like if you wanted to really develop someone's character and do what we call give them a black belt character, what would that person have to go through to become someone with a black belt character who has high levels of confidence, conduct, concentration, who has a moral compass, high levels of resilience, who can overcome traumatic experiences on their own, like changing school, like adolescence, like bullying? What would you put them through at a young age? What mentor would you give them? And it's like you have to give them little challenges, micro experiences of danger, mentored in the right way, and then slowly step back. And I think as a mentor and as a parent, it's this balance of protection and empowerment.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like those two forces come together to produce someone's character.
Absolutely. And to that, I would even add free will and choice, like protection, empowerment, free will, so they know they have a voice. They have a voice that people want to hear and doesn't get suppressed. And the power of choice. It's not this or that. I can choose.
Yeah.
I can choose. It's either this or it's that. What's serving me right now?
So it's like empowerment to believe in yourself. Empowerment to listen to your own voice. And if you go too far down the empowerment route, right, it's like you push them outside of their comfort zone, outside of the high performance zone, into the hyper anxiety stage.
Yeah.
And so many people I've worked with, they now overprotect their kids because when they were younger, their parents pushed them too far.
Yeah.
And so remember, right, we don't want to be that, so we be the opposite. Now we're overprotecting. And the reality there is whenever they try and do something, they've got their father's voice or their mother's voice who's pushing them too far to do something. And it becomes a negative experience.
Yeah.
Their comfort zone becomes a negative thing.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like true empowerment, that balance which meets in between, really says, I believe in my own voice. I believe in the things that I want to do. I believe in the direction I'm choosing to go in. Having that kind of decisive nature is strength of character, right?
Yeah. And you want the individual to grow up to be very confident in their decisions, but also know that not every decision of yours is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to be, I'm sure you've made
okay to make mistakes.
Exactly.
Right? And again, too much empowerment, too much focus on the kind of pushing yourself too far is there is no, failure is not an option. You have to keep going. You have to, it's like, well, actually, we need to accept the fact that we will make mistakes, and those mistakes will probably make us wiser and stronger overall.
Yeah. Sometimes when I'm speaking to clients and let's say they messed up or, something happened in their life and they had a real food fest, and they'll come onto the call and they'll say, Natassia, I had pizza, and they're really they're waiting for me to snap and, and I'll say, okay, all right. Did you feel good? Did you feel fine? Can we pick up now? How are your taste buds doing? Can we pick up where we left off? How are your calories doing? And they're just waiting for me to snap. They're waiting for me to yell because they've
That's what they used to.
Exactly. They've been
trained to wait for that response. Right?
Exactly. Especially from adults that have been raised in households where parents have bullied them for their weight.
Yeah.
You know, and they picked them and said, why can't you be like your brother or sister? Look at them. They're in the, you know, in the football league, or they're in the swimming camp and things of that sort. Look at you. You know, you'll notice this
They're almost
behavior.
expecting failure.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Right?
We've got a saying in the Warrior Academy, which is, you earn your losses.
Yeah.
And you can ask any of our instructors, team, professional fighters, world champions, European champions, national champions, right? The matches they've gone to, the competitions, the championships where they've lost, they've learned 10 times as much as when they won. And it's amazing if you just have the resilience to push through. And I guess a lot of that resilience comes from understanding what a loss actually means.
Yeah.
And so the reason we say you earn your losses is because for every win, there's like 10 losses. So to get that win, you've got to start earning your losses to get there. You don't just rock up and there's your trophy.
Absolutely.
And this is where things like participation medals come in, and it's like, this is a disaster for young people because we're overprotecting. And really, we should be teaching them, you didn't win this time, next time, didn't win, next time, didn't win. Now you've earned it. You've earned your losses. You've earned the win, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, and this is that gray, that fine line that we talk about, you know. And I tell my clients, they're like, Natassia, didn't you hear? I said I had a whole pizza. I was like, okay, you had the pizza. Now what? Let's pick up where we left off and move on. Why do we want to ruminate on it? Why do we want to sit in that guilt and carry it on from day to day and feel sorry for ourselves and eat more, right? So it's that crucial moment that it's almost like they live for that. Yeah. It's almost like they thrive on that ruminating.
What's interesting there is when someone does that, right, they overeat, they feel guilty, they feel shame, they're going down this downward spiral. And if someone then says, oh, you shouldn't have done that, they carry on the spiral. Oh, now I feel worse, I got to eat some more. Yeah. But I feel like the work you do kind of stops that spiral and kind of reverses it back up.
Absolutely.
So that, can we start now? Can we restart? It's like, bang, we start working our way back to where we were, right?
Absolutely, you know, and it's just recognizing what you've done, probably not your best day, right? Talk about what happened in your life for you to go there. Is it, you know, an argument, someone pissed you off, did someone make you angry, what it is? Get it out of your system, let's talk about it, and let's move on. Yeah. Because this is life. This is life. This is the way it's meant to be. But when people are not used to that, when they're used to just sitting in there and being made guilty and, you know, being made feel like crap because they had a pizza, that's when it carries on for days and days. So yeah, that's it's beautiful to see. It's beautiful to observe, you know, and I always just say one day at a time. One day at a time. That's...
Must be such rewarding work when you realize you're working with someone who's just completely changed their patterns, right?
Yeah, it's the... I genuinely love what I do. I really genuinely love what I do. I always knew I wanted to do something in weight loss after my own personal journey, but I never knew what it was. You know, I knew I didn't want to be a trainer. I knew I didn't want to be a complete full-on nutritionist and dietitian. I wanted to help individuals. And now that I'm doing genuinely what I love, the fact that I struggled with these things, the fact that there's so many out there suffering in silence, struggling with exactly the same, I feel like this is it, you know, you feel fulfilled. You feel fulfilled and no one can take that feeling.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me like your work is more that of a therapist than anything else. Yeah. It's less of a weight loss coach, and you could almost say if you think it's about weight loss, you're missing the point. Because ultimately it's about, you know, correcting previous negative traits and healing previous wounds, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, I always, my clients, when they come on the call, I would never ask them. My first question to them will never be, what was your weight this week, right? It will always be, how was your week? How did it go? How did you feel? You had a big dinner this weekend. How did that go? You know, what did you notice about yourself? And then last but not the least is the weight. Yeah. Because if all these areas are not okay, the weight's
just a physical symptom of what's going on behind the scenes.
Exactly.
Right. And what's going on behind the scenes is deep, and it's, you know, ingrained decades ago, right?
Exactly. And, you know, this is why it's so important. It's so important. And it's important for me to educate people in what I do, because people are not used to it. You know, people are used to the trainers, the 60-day programs, the six-pack abs in 60 days. That's what people are used to. Yeah. So when you have a woman like myself approaching social media, approaching individuals and saying, this is what I do and this is how I can get you there, they're skeptical. Yeah. You know, and then they sign up with me and they kind of see the journey that I take them on. I have tons of clients that I work with privately. And the other part of the work that I do is I can't showcase everyone's story.
Yeah.
However, because it's that deep. It's not about, here's what I looked like 6 months ago and here's what I am. But it's, here's how I thought 6 months ago and this is how I think now, you know? So it's quite interesting, but it's that education piece that I have to then take the responsibility to showcase people, because once they know better, then they do better.
Yeah.
Right? So...
Yeah, it's one of those things where a lot of the time you want to realize why the problem's there in the first place, right? So you have to educate them first. We find that with bullying a lot, and educating parents about bullying, why it's there in the first place, and it's very linked to a lot of the stuff you're saying. And I feel like you approach your work with a lot of courage, a lot of authenticity and transparency, and I think that's very inspiring for a lot of people. You mentioned that you promote facing failure and losses and this sort of stuff. Can you think back to your weight loss journey, and can you share any examples of where you've really reached kind of rock bottom or moments of what you would call loss or failure during that journey?
Absolutely. So when I first lost all my weight, I was 145 kilos and I lost about 60-ish kilos.
Wow.
And for me, that was a major win. I lost all my weight. I even remember going to my doctor's office and saying, what now? And he said, now go live your life. For all the years that you've been overweight, for all the years that people bullied you, for all the things that you didn't eat over the past 2 years, go live your life. And I did. And within a span of 6 to 8 months, I gained back 30 kilos of the weight I lost.
Mm.
And for me, that was rock bottom.
Right.
For me, that was failure.
You thought you were going back to where you were before.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I told myself, how? How could I ever let this happen to myself? All I ever wanted was a child, was not to be bullied, was not to be made fun of, was not to, have an uncle or an aunt tell me, oh, look at you, you're the fat daughter. How as an adult, in 8 months, I allowed this to happen to myself. And that for me, I couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand that I gained all this weight.
Did you feel like you kind of stopped trusting yourself?
Absolutely.
And it was like you would let yourself down?
Absolutely.
The
self-trust piece was out the window. But I'm so grateful for the opportunity and the thought process that I went through to ask myself, then it's not the food. Then it's not the diet. It is what's happening in my head. How am I looking at food? Because I had lost control around food. I was eating mass amounts. I was ordering Chinese cakes and just eating mass amounts, stopping, waiting for the pain to die down, eating again. It was absolute control, so absolute loss of control. And I was telling myself, this is not just diet and exercise. This is an obsession with food. This is me feeling unsafe. This is me feeling sad. And this is when I started taking up my first nutrition courses, understanding eating disorders. I got exposed to binge eating and realized I had a lot of the same traits. I had just moved cities. So I used to live in Toronto with my parents. I moved to Montreal, didn't know a single person in the city. And I moved with this new body. And of course, I was lonely, understanding that binge eating is a response to loneliness. It is a response to, especially if you suffered from trauma as a child, That's just what I was doing. The moment I started realizing that, okay, I need to expand my circle. Okay, I need to make more friends. I need to keep myself busy. The binge eating symptoms died down. The minute I felt more stress or the minute I felt lonely again, they rose back up. So through my failure during that time where I was at my worst, it had taught me some of my biggest lessons, and it allowed me then to re-lose the weight again, which many people would have just given up. Say, I've done it now and I've gained all the weight back.
Differently, you approached it differently.
Very differently, very, very differently. And I always tell people, because they're like, Natassia, will I ever stop binging? And I said, it's never the binge, it's the urge to binge. And the urge to binge never goes away. You just get really, really good at handling it. I still have urges to binge on my high stress days, on my sad days, but I just know how to turn the volume down and say, okay, it's happening. I see you. Let's move on with life.
Yeah.
So for me, it was failure, but it made me the person I am today.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful.
I think you almost needed to go through that.
Yeah.
Where you lost it all and realized you were putting it back on and you hadn't actually fixed the problem.
Yeah.
So then fix that so that you could properly mentor your clients.
Absolutely.
But that whole journey was such a lesson to you, I imagine.
Huge. because a lot of my clients have also lost all the weight and gained it back on. A lot of my clients have had gastric bypasses, have had balloons, have used the injections, gained weight back from there, so it's
they've never fixed the root cause.
They've never fixed
because they've never understood where it came from.
Exactly.
Yeah. There's the education piece.
Exactly, right? And it's just like, no, what's the next best thing that I can do to get my weight loss? It's not the next best thing. It's what you've never worked on. It's what you've swept under the rug for years and years and years is what we need to talk about. Because you've done that, it's why you keep leaning to food for comfort.
Yeah.
Right? So it's getting that out to them and making them understand that, which is the toughest bit, let's say. But once they get through it and they experience it for themselves, then it's a game changer.
Do you find that it's a wide range of people that you work with, or do you find that it's more the extreme cases? Because a lot of what you're talking about, it's very much the root cause of something is something traumatic or painful they've been through. Whereas for a lot of people, they might just have a kind of skewed perception of what they should look like.
Yeah.
So therefore, they think they need to be super lean, or they need to be more muscular or toned, or whatever it is, right? And so there's like that 5% difference they need.
Yeah.
Whereas for a lot of your clients, it's a lot more. And so the actual energy and the reason that they're in that position comes from a very different place, right?
Yeah, and those are the people I choose not to work with, right? My work is very niche. It's taken me a long time to understand my niche and get to where I am. And it's not a quick fix. It's the ones with the deep struggles. It's the ones that are losing their control. It's the ones that are trying to explain themselves to their friends and families, and they're like, well, it's just food, get over it.
Yeah. Just eat less and do more steps.
Exactly. It's the ones that are alone and have no voice and are just being told, get on a diet or get the next best trainer. That's the kind of people I work with, because I'm not just coaching them, but I'm creating a community for them.
Yeah.
I'm building a community where they feel safe, where they feel I work very, very hard on facial recognitions, understanding my client, really, building that level of safe space, because these individuals have not had a safe space to speak up for years with their husbands or their family or, their friends. So it's about really, empowering them. And if it's someone just coming and saying, well, I'm 15% body fat, but I like to get 10%, but I can't control myself for cookies.
It's not your client.
It's not my type of client, right? There is definitely something mentally going on there, psychologically going on there, but it's not an area I wanna work with or develop the individual towards, because now you're going for the aesthetic appeal of it, not because you want to change as an individual out and stop doing what you were doing, let's say.
So if we were to first of all identify who it is you work with, maybe there's 5 elements, five core elements, and there could be a lot of people watching this who would associate with those 5 things. What would you say those 5 things are?
One of the core elements would be a certain struggle with food, overeating, binge eating, struggling, snacking, over snacking, grazing is a huge one. So that's one of the top elements. The next element will also be a major weight fluctuations, losing weight drastically, gaining weight drastically. Another major element would be, the individual's history with restrictive diets. So how many diets they've been on, because then they think it's the next best diet, right? What's the next best diet? They're on that hunt of next best diet. The other element, of course, is the weight. If they're struggling with their weight and they have no willingness to work out, and that's just not the kind of person they are. And last but not the least would be habits. Their eating habits, their day-to-day habits, their routine, the lack of structure and things. So it's making them understand why habits are important and why the habits that are in their current life are actually not serving them. But a lot of people connect their habits to their thoughts, and they think that every thought that comes to their head is one they need to believe. And that's an individual, that would be one of the criteria as well, because I can spot that from a mile away, right? And those would be the main.
So you're very clear on who you want to work with, and I think that's brilliant. So for anyone who has listened to those 5 criteria and is like, you're speaking directly to me, right? Because often when we spend so long understanding our customers, we know exactly who we want to work with, and so the way we talk, in our videos and our content and stuff, a lot of parents come to us and say, it's like you're just speaking to me, right? I imagine you get a lot of that as well. And for any parent who's watching this right now and feels that way, what advice, now if we go down the practical route, what advice would you give them from today to think about?
That's a good question.
If you kind of picture yourself in their shoes right now, and you the start of your weight loss journey, before you had that education piece, and watch this podcast and listen to those five criteria and the other information we just shared, what advice would you give yourself?
I would say, observe your kids, observe them with not the intention to scold or change, but observe them to see that they're safe, that they're being heard, that they're being challenged, that they're expressing free will, that they're expressing certain the characteristics that you would like to see. Observe them and then direct them, because a lot of times what we tend to see is we see observation and no, don't do that. No, don't do that. And then the child, you're stopping that child from making that failure, that mistake that we're talking about. No, mom doesn't like it. I'm not going to do that. So observe them to guide them. Observe them to fail. Observe them to tell them that it's going to be okay no matter what path you take. And then be a great example. We're all trying to not repeat those cycles, but like we spoke about, unintentionally do. So while you're observing them, observe yourself around them and see how you are kind of with your child, how you encourage them, how you support them. And maybe there are things that you could do better. Maybe there are things that you could enlighten them with or change if need be. Yeah. That would be my biggest piece of advice, just being open to that spectrum, because there's no right or wrong way. Just being open to change.
That's brilliant advice. It's been an amazing conversation. I know that so many people are going to benefit so much from this. Tell me what's coming up in the future for you, and how can our viewers learn more about what you do, maybe work with you?
Well, a lot. I have a program coming out very soon called Breaking the Cycle, which I've rolled out in the past before, but I'm rolling it out again. This time, however, I'm rolling it out on quite not intense, but I'm doing it within a span of 8 weeks, and I'm doing it at a more affordable level, because I get contacted now from tons of high school students, university students, and they can't afford it, or they are not ready at that level of understanding to go through the change. And I always told myself I would start this so that I could help everyone, so that when no one helped me when I was a teenager, when I was a child. So I'm starting this new program to help girls, women, men on a more affordable level. That's going to come out, hopefully, fingers crossed, first week of November. But other than that, I mean, if anyone's looking for inspiration, motivation, things of that, so they can always follow me on my socials, Natassia D'Souza, or reach me on my website.
Amazing. Look, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being so authentic and sharing with such transparency and courage, what you've been through and how you now help other people.
Thank you, Sebastian. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
I really hope you enjoyed today's Warrior Academy podcast episode. We're going to keep creating these episodes because I know that so many parents find them useful or get insights or get ideas about how to develop their child's character. But it all comes down to the 3 C's: confidence, conduct, and concentration. So if you want to get a deep insight into the levels of confidence your child has, the level of concentration they have, or the level of conduct they have, so that you can actually put a score next to it and then work towards increasing those scores like we do in the Warrior Academy, then I'd love to invite you to fill in the Breakthrough Area Assessment. It takes about 5 minutes of your time, and you will get a personalized PDF report on your child's 3 C's. To access the Breakthrough Area Assessment and find out your child's 3 C's score, all you need to do is go to www.breakthrougharea.com.